Good afternoon, everyone. It's the left versus the right. At least that's the title of this show. The left and the right are often going in different directions, but today I think we're kind of going in the same direction because my guest is the very dynamic county leader of Kings for the Republican Party, Craig Eaton. Craig,
Governor,
good afternoon.
It is my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
No, this is exciting for me. And before we came on, we were talking about the fact that we have a new pope now. And he's from Chicago, but he's lived all over the world. And it'll be interesting to see how the church moves, because with Pope Francis, either you were really for him or you were kind of against him. And we'll see how Pope Leo the 14th will thrive.
You know, it's funny because I don't think he was the front runner. There was one cardinal out there that everyone thought was going to be the front runner and was going to succeed to be pope. And then this American cardinal came up and was selected. So it was kind of a surprise to everybody, I think.
And it was a surprise to everybody, but maybe not for Pope Leo the 14th, because I read somewhere that his brother said to him right before they went to the conclave, "What Pope's name do you think I should use if I win?" So this opens the door that he is clairvoyant or the election was stolen.
You know, it's funny, Governor, because in anticipation of this conclave, my wife and I watched the movie Conclave last week. And it came out, I think, a year or so ago, and we never watched it. So we figured, let's watch it and let's learn about what's going to happen. And it seems like the front runners, in that movie at least, were asked by the dean who was running the conclave to start thinking about what name they would want to call themselves if they were elected pope.
Oh, I see.
So I think maybe then there wasn't the first round where Cardinal Prevost was selected. So I guess after the first or second round, maybe this was the third round that he was selected, maybe after the first two rounds, you can get an inkling of who's going to, succeed and
what the trend is.
Yeah, and what the trend is and who will, win at the end.
You know, it's interesting. Pope Leo the 13th, who now Pope Leo the 14th said that he really admired him, did a little reading up on him. He was kind of like Pope Francis. This is in the late 19th century, and there were a lot of strikes, labor strikes around the world, and workers kind of demanding more from people that ran businesses, and kind of an underground political movement to make change. And apparently Pope Leo the 13th, to the chagrin of the leaders of these different countries and businesses, sided with the people at that particular time. And apparently this really touched Cardinal Provost, because then he has taken the name that succeeds Leo the 13th by becoming Pope Leo the 14th.
Well, you and I have been to many, many dinners and events with John and with Cardinal Dolan.
Yes.
And, when the Pope passed, on the text messages with John and a lot of people in the studio here, I said, wouldn't it be great if Cardinal Dolan became the next Pope? And everyone responded, it will never be an American. And when we found out it was an American, I was happy to hear that. I was also disappointed that it wasn't Cardinal Dolan, because I find him to be one of the most amazing clerics,
wonderful
that I've ever met.
Person. When I was having a lot of problems as governor, and most of them were not ignited by anything I did, he on several occasions spoke out saying he's trying to do his job. There are negative forces around him. Please give him a chance. And I never forgot the things that he said in that particular situation. Now, he has a wicked sense of humor,
Yes.
He had a service, and I was in the back, and when everybody was leaving, they were all saying goodbye to him. When I came up to me, he says, "Yeah, it's Governor Paterson. He always sits in the back because he thinks that the collection plate won't go back that far. and that's who he actually is. Speaking of dinners, Craig, last night I went to the dinner honoring Daniel Penny, the subway rider who intervened when a passenger was threatening other riders on the train, and even threw some objects that hit other riders on the train. Nothing really that hard, but still, it was a frightening situation. He intervened, and in subduing the individual who was causing the problems, the individual succumbed, and so that created a controversy all around the city. But the thing I think, and there have been other situations, honestly, where, you had this racial clash, a white policeman and a black teenager, something like that.
Yep.
But in this particular situation, here is a person who did have training in the military, but he was not acting as a military person at the time. He's a civilian like everyone else. He saw a terrible situation starting to unfold, yep. And he tried to stop it, and he did stop it. I'm sure he felt badly about the outcome. I think everybody did, but it's very hard to question his judgment at that moment, and that was really the theme of the dinner last night.
There was a lot of controversy over that. And at points, I'll admit, I was wondering, did he need to choke him as hard as he did? But, when you read all of the accounts from the witnesses, you realize that this happened so quickly. And everyone in the train car, in the vicinity of this event or this thing that took place, feared for their lives. I mean, they said they were afraid. So he did what he had to do to protect the people in the car and protect everyone else, and to make sure that there weren't anyone injured or killed.
And my understanding, Craig, is that he feared for his own life.
Yes.
When he grabbed the guy, he wasn't sure because he's choking him, but the guy's hands are free.
Yep.
And he was afraid he might pull something out of his pocket and stab him or something like that.
That's true.
And I think it's really difficult for people who are not involved to come to conclusions, not based on facts, but based on perhaps other situations that have occurred that upset them, and they see this as something in furtherance of that. But if you can't pull yourself back and try to be objective sometimes about situations and circumstances, then you're really not even being fair to yourself.
But like we were discussing before, is, the subways are a little dangerous at times. I grew up in Sheepshead Bay, went to Xavier High School in Manhattan, so I took the subway at 14 years old every morning. And, this was post-Vietnam. The subways were different than they are today. And it was challenging. Sometimes you'd find yourself at 10 o'clock at night taking the subway from Manhattan all the way to the end of the D line. And then I took it through college and through law school. And now, like I said before to you, is I really don't take the subway anymore, but I take it once a year because now I live in Bay Ridge, and I do the 40-mile bike tour to raise funds for Heart Human Services every year.
Right.
So my son and I and my son-in-law got on the train in Bay Ridge at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning with our bicycles, and we took it to City Hall, which is where we meet up and start the bike tour. And even at 6 o'clock in the morning, Governor, it was like a homeless hotel.
Yeah.
There were homeless people throughout. There were dangerous young people walking back and forth through the cars. So it is frightening, and I can understand why a lot of people fear going into the subway today.
I was taking the subway to 135th and Lenox Avenue. That would be the 2 train. And on this particular night, I had crutches because I had turned my ankle playing basketball or something. And I misjudged the stop. I thought I was on the 2 train, and I was really on the 4 train. So the next stop was in the Bronx. And I feel like I'm on crutches. I'm legally blind. I might as well have a sign on me. This is just mug me.
Just
mug me now. Let's get it over with.
Let's hope not. Let's
and
hope they don't do
finally,
that.
as I finally find my way to the downtown train that will take me there, these two men came up to me. I'm like, oh, here it is. And they said, can we help you, sir? And I said, no, I think I'm okay. And they said, oh, just checking. And they walked away. And I thought, wow, there are some decent people down in the subway. You just have to find them.
There were a lot of decent people in this city. And the tragedy of it all is that any time an event takes place, whether it's white on black, black on black, brown on white, or whatever, it just seems like it escalates and it turns racial. And I think if everyone would just calm down and look at the facts and evaluate them for what they really are, they will see that a lot of times these things are not racially motivated. It just so happens to be who the people are involved in these incidents.
I remember an incident that occurred years ago that was very much racialized, and it had to do with the assault on Abner Louima.
Yes,
Remember him?
yes.
And he was in the club. There was a fight there. And in breaking up the fight, they arrest him. And then he was assaulted with a bat handle in the bathroom of the police department. And there was, strong feelings on both sides, racially. And then the police officer who was watching the door, who was the lookout, while Justin Volpe was named the police officer that assaulted Abner Louima, when he got on the stand, he testified that he was the lookout. He told the truth.
Yeah.
And he got blasted. I mean, even right here on WABC, people called up and Bob Grant was, egging him on a little bit about how could that officer do that to his colleague? Yeah, but he could have killed the guy in the bathroom. And, that was another time where I felt people let their emotions, they didn't want to feel that a policeman could actually do that to someone, but they found out that it could happen.
Well, that really was one of the darkest days in the history of the city's police department and the city of New York. I mean, it was disgraceful what happened that day. I mean, it should have never happened. This poor guy gets arrested. I don't know what the facts are surrounding his arrest, but he should have never been assaulted like he was by Officer Volpe.
Yeah. Apparently, they were grabbing people in the club to arrest them, not as much because they were doing something, but because they were there.
Yeah.
They wanted to clean the place out, but somehow this guy, Louima, winds up in the bathroom with a horrible fate that whenever I imagine what happened to him, I cringe. But in terms of the subways, makes me think of we're coming up on the Democratic primary for mayor, and the Republican candidate will be Curtis Lewa, who we know, and we assume that Eric Adams is going to run as an independent on a party he created or something. And I think with those three candidates out there, the more activist, leftist-leaning politicians might gather around someone like Zoran Mondani, run him on, say, the Working Families Party for mayor, and then that would be quite a contest if that would occur.
Well, you know what? I'll put on my Republican hat for a minute, as I was the chairman for 11 years in Brooklyn and the vice chair in the state party for New York City. And I must say that the Democratic Party in New York City and New York State is the gift that keeps on giving. What the Democratic Party has done, look at what came out in the last few weeks. You have the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, had a house foreclosed on. The state attorney general has been implicated in a mortgage fraud scandal after she committed herself to prosecute President Trump for the same thing that she's now being accused of. And you have, Mayor de Blasio had a lot of problems with that, $1.1 billion that his wife spent that no one ever knew where that went.
That was the mental health services.
Yeah, Thrive New York,
money.
I think was the name of that.
Yeah.
No one ever investigated that. No one ever looked into it. No one ever prosecuted it, put it into a grand jury. over $1 billion of New York City taxpayer money for a mental health program that never took off. And then you got, Mayor Adams after de Blasio, who I happen to know very, very well. I think that he's a decent guy and a really nice guy. But, you see what he's accused of. So I think this mayoral race, the Democratic primary in this mayoral race is going to be very, very entertaining.
Well, I don't know how entertaining it really is going to be, Craig, because right now, in terms of fundraising, Andrew Cuomo's way ahead. In terms of the polls, Andrew Cuomo's way ahead. In terms of previous experience, with the possible exception of Mayor Adams, but he's not in the primary anymore, Andrew Cuomo is way ahead. So I don't know if Andrew Cuomo could roll under his bed right now and stay there until primary night, I think he would be nominated.
The only problem, I agree with you 100%. I think that it is Cuomo's race to lose right now.
Right.
When we talk about that, we're talking about just the Democratic primary for the time being.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But you do have that Mondani, 34-year-old guy, socialist, Muslim, who has raised over $4 million, including matching funds.
And whatever you think of his politics, he's a dynamic speaker.
Yes.
He comes right to the point that you might disagree with, but he's sometimes there's certain people, they have that flair, and he has it, and a lot of people will embrace it because he knows what he's talking about. He might not have the same viewpoint that you and I have, but he makes you think.
But you know what? If you look at the dynamic of New York City right now, it has gone left of left. It has gone progressive, and there's a lot of socialism out there. There's a lot of candidates, assemblymen, senators, and council members that are progressive. So, and then you have AOC. You can't discount her support of him. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And then you got to throw into the mix, Governor. You got to throw in the ranked choice voting.
Do we have to?
Yeah, you do, which I don't know how the government ever allowed ranked choice voting to come into play. I do know why. I just don't know how it ever got approved, because it just muddies the waters totally.
Absolutely. And look, think about this. Mayor Adams won the primary by 107,000 votes. Then when they went to round two, the gap got closed by Catherine Garcia, and then in the eighth round, the final round, Mayor Adams wins by 7,000 votes.
Yeah.
So somehow 100,000 voters, second and third and fourth choices added up.
Yep.
To almost cause Mayor Adams to lose. And by the way, in that primary, I saw Mayor Adams as a moderate in that campaign. I didn't see him as in that realm that you've described, some other Democrats. And I thought that's why so many people wanted to vote for him. And then, his experience in law enforcement and on one hand, and also his experience as a kind of civil rights leader on the other hand, made him a great candidate. But it almost slipped away from him then.
Well, you know what? Mayor Adams was a Republican years back.
Yes.
And then he was Democratic senator for a long time, then the borough president in Brooklyn. And we had a very close relationship because I was the chairman of Community Board 10 in Brooklyn. And
really?
I worked under him when he was the borough president. And then as the Republican chairman, we worked with him on, different political things that happened in Brooklyn. And you're right, he is a moderate. But at some point during his first term, he did go a little bit left of his moderate stance. And I guess that was so that he would, please the left-leaning part of the Democratic Party so that he could get reelected and wouldn't have challenges.
Right, as victorious candidates will tend to reach out to the other side and embrace some of their programs, perhaps, that kind of thing.
But it's just interesting the turn of what happened, where he got, indicted and then, President Trump interceded and now he's running as an independent. But I think that, I think the general election here, is going to be something that we all need to watch because we don't know how it's going to play out. We don't know who the Democratic candidate's going to be at this point. I mean, I think that the money is on Andrew Cuomo. So if it's Andrew Cuomo, he's also going to run on another line. Is it the Working Families line or another independent line?
I know he was looking for another independent line.
Yep.
And when we come back, I'll tell you why. We're on the left versus the right. I'm David Paterson, supposedly on the left, and Craig Eaton, supposedly on the right. And we suppose that we'll be back right after these commercial messages.
We hope so.
We're back on the left versus the right. And I'm David Paterson, joined by my friend and colleague, Craig Eaton, who is now the vice chair, I understand, of the statewide Republican Party. Is that right?
I was up until 2016. I was the chairman of Brooklyn for 11 years, and I was the vice chair of the state party for all of New York City for about 4 of those years.
I see. Working under both of our friend Chairman Ed Cox.
Yeah.
You won't meet a more genteel human being than Ed Cox, who was a very good friend of my father's back in the day. They knew each other, and whenever my father's name comes up, Ed Cox makes sure that he puts in that, they had this friendship. But we were talking about, right before about the election, and the reason now I don't know this for a fact, but the reason it's been suggested that Andrew Cuomo take out an independent line for himself, even if he wins the Democratic primary, is so that there will be a place for perhaps Democrats who are a little tired of who's running in that party, or even maybe a Republican or two that doesn't think the Republican Party can win. That he would be the repository for those who, in a sense, can't make up their minds.
Well, historically, for decades, you haven't had any independent candidate successful in a mayoral race. I don't know when the last one was.
It was in 1969.
Okay.
When John Lindsay, who was the Republican candidate, and what was interesting is in the Republican primary, John Lindsay was a Republican, but he governed like a Democrat.
Yeah.
And John Markey, another outstanding public servant, and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, he beat Mayor Lindsay in the primary.
Wow.
So Mayor Lindsay starts this new line called the New Urban Coalition. And the New Urban Coalition votes, plus the Democratic votes, were more than the Republican votes that Senator Markey could get. While we're on Senator Markey for a second, we were having a debate about apartheid in South Africa. This is like mid-80s, something like that. And Senator Markey said that 2/3 of the blacks in South Africa support the apartheid conditions. So I raised my hand, and the president of the Senate let me speak, and I said, Senator Markey, did you know that in South Africa it is illegal to take a political position against that of the government? So what I want to know is who are the 25% of the people that voted that way anyway, because they were wasting their time.
Yes.
So after the session was over, and I was talking to someone, and I come out on the Democratic side, but Senator Markey is sitting at a table right outside in the foyer. He goes, "Oh, Governor Paterson, can I talk to Senator Paterson? Can I talk to you for a second?" So I go over and sit down because he was the senior member and I was the youngest member. He said, I had my staff look up that information. You were absolutely right. I'd like to thank you for bringing it to my attention. And he put his hand on it and he said, and I will never bring it up again. And that's who he was. And
did he ever challenge you again after that on anything?
It's funny. They had a Young Democrats event in Staten Island once, and Markey came and actually spoke. He said, I love working with this guy.
He was great, Senator Markey.
He really was, and thoughtful, really, and a real historian. But that's, that what we were talking about is going to be the the challenge when these candidates all face off in November, because there are likely to be 3 or 4 of them.
Well, you know what you're going to have? You're going to have Governor Cuomo, if he wins the Democratic line, he'll be on that line and probably an independent line. You have, or whoever wins the Democratic line will run, and then Cuomo will be on the independent line himself.
Right.
You have Curtis Sliwa, who we both know, who I believe has the most name recognition of any of these candidates. I mean, maybe next to Cuomo. I mean, he's just been out in the subways for decades now. Everybody knows him around the city. And I've been with him at different events, and everyone knows him. Everyone wants to shake his hand and say hello. You have Eric Adams, who's on an independent line. I don't think he's going to fare that well, because I think the Democrats are going to go with either Cuomo or whoever else is on the Democratic line. And then you have the centrist, Jim Walden, who's running, who's a former federal prosecutor in Brooklyn. Very well spoken, very well funded. I mean, I think he's got over $2 million in the bank. And it's funny because I look at him as a potential alternative, where if people say, and I think it's possible, people will say, well, we've had 12 years of Democratic leadership in New York, and from the de Blasio administration through the Adams administration, there's been so much fraud and things going on. It's time for a change. We don't want another Democrat. And then they say, but I can't vote for a Republican. And you have a guy in the middle, like a Jim Walden, who's like a Bloomberg-esque. He's a former prosecutor, runs a big law firm, looks a little like Bloomberg, well-spoken, well-funded, like I said, a lawyer. He could offer a potential option for people that don't want to go left or far left or don't want to go far right.
I think with candidates like that, they've got to be as present as possible.
Yep.
In other words, that, sometimes you just have to do something to get attention. I mean, there's no one who understands this better than our President Trump, that it's not always whether you're right or wrong. It's that you're there,
and he's always there,
and he's always there, and so we'll see how most of that goes. What do you think about the conflict right now as we jump from local politics to international politics between Pakistan and India? They are threatening each other, and President Trump on Friday demanded that Pakistan not engage in any more violent activity toward India, which is the first notion that he might be taking a side there, because both countries have very good relations with the United States and with President Trump. But the thing is, it's probably the most militarized place in the whole world right now. And my fear is once people start fighting, other people start fighting.
Yep.
And that's, that there are probably some terrorists in Egypt somewhere who are just waiting to see if the India-Pakistani conflict turns into a real war, and then
there's going to be wars all over the place.
There'd be wars all over the place.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because if you look at the 4 years of the Biden administration and even the first 100 days of the Trump administration, everyone was talking during the Biden administration about, Russia and Ukraine. They were talking about Iran and Iraq. No one really focused on any kind of a conflict or disclosed any kind of a real conflict between Pakistan and India.
Right.
And if you look and take a deep dive, those two countries both have nuclear capabilities. And it should be more scary for everybody that these two countries out here now with these capabilities are at odds with each other.
Absolutely. And probably the next week or two should be quite telling, in the sense of we'll see whether or not President Trump wants to get more involved. We'll also see if either of the two countries buckles and decides to, for the time being, leave things the way they are. But it's, there've been far greater stories that are in the news these days with, the Republicans trying to pass the tax bill in Washington and other things that are going on that people are just going to pay more attention to. But this is a very serious issue, and it is quite the international conflict. It also demonstrates, in my opinion, Craig, the total uselessness of the UN. Like, what's that there for? Why don't we tear it down and put up a movie theater or something?
I agree, but I was just pulling up an article that I saw this morning that on Wednesday, a top Chinese-made Pakistani fighter plane shot down at least 2 Indian military aircraft. And this was on Wednesday, according to Reuters. An Indian Air Force spokesman said he had no comment when asked about that report. So it seems like, and that was Wednesday, so it seems like it's escalating a little bit.
Right.
And like you said, you have Hamas and you have Hezbollah, you got Houthis, you got all these different factions out there that all they want to do is fight and create conflict. And if they see a war going on in that region, who knows what can happen in all these other regions that are on the brink of war anyway?
Because they know that the publicity from the India-Pakistani war, if you might call it that, masks the fact that a lot of organizing and terrorism can take place in other places to the point that, you don't even know which situation to address initially at that point.
Well, you know what? And we talk. I'm on John's show every Tuesday from 5 to 6, Katz and Cosby, and we talk all the time about what we believe and what we perceive as the damage to this country and the damage to the world that was inflicted on us during the 4 years under the Biden administration. Because look at the open borders and the migrants, the hundreds of thousands, almost millions of people come in without being vetted. And all of the international conflict that took place that wouldn't have taken place if we had a stronger White House and a stronger president. Like, none of this would have happened, in my opinion, if President Trump was president over the last 4 years.
I am a Democrat, and I voted for Biden in 2000 when he ran against Trump.
Yep.
And but I have been rather shocked at his conduct since he left office. He's commenting about how it's sexism that elected President Trump over Kamala Harris. No, it was Kamala Harris's debates that caused her to lose to President Trump. He was very good in the first one, but then, like a flash in the pan.
Yes.
That was it for her. Then President's talking about his fears about people worked in his administration, how they're going to be treated, and this kind of activism where most presidents, when they leave, and you don't hear from them either because eventually they pass away or something that's relevant comes up and a former president might have something to say about it. But I've just been shocked at the way he's acted. When I left as governor, there was a new governor in. I didn't want to be, creating any conflict. I didn't say a word about state issues for about 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Then you're out long enough now that you could actually do that kind of thing. But
it's the honorable and the professional thing to do. And that's why everyone respects you, Governor, and always says you were one of the best governors we had here because you did your job for 3 years and you kept us strong and you were moderate and you did what you had to do and you didn't have anything to say bad when you left. And that's why we all respect you.
Well, thank you for that. I wish you'd called me at the time.
To tell you not to do it?
Right, exactly.
But, I think a lot of what Biden is doing now, I think Biden left under terms that he wasn't happy about. And I think he's just trying to either remain relevant now or try and change the course of, what people are going to believe about him, post-presidency.
You know how you have flashbacks in life? Something, every once in a while, my mind flashes back to that debate where Biden slurs his words and said, we took care of Medicare when he was actually talking about another issue.
Oh, yeah.
And then Trump says, I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't think he knows what he's talking about.
It's almost, in my opinion, it's almost like I looked at it and I said, this is like elder abuse. Because they have this elderly man up here as president and they're propping him up and everyone behind him wants him to remain as president, wanted him to run again as president. But I think everybody knew he didn't have the mental acuity or the ability to serve 4 more years. But nobody wanted to give up that power, so they just figured, let's do this. And then they gave it to Kamala Harris, which I thought was a total gift to the Republican Party.
Well, the research demonstrated that other people were running the government.
Oh, 100%.
All around him,
Yes.
almost like what happened with Woodrow Wilson when his wife was running the government because of his illness. Nobody said anything about it. Why is it so bad that a person might have to step down from a position because their health doesn't permit them to serve? A lot of these decisions were not being made by him. Documents weren't being read by him. And there weren't that many people talking to him. So he was almost in isolation. And then when it finally, you can keep, it's like football. You can keep covering different people.
Yeah.
But then somebody breaks free and they get a touchdown. That's what happened in that debate, because that incident blew the whole thing up. Now the issue of his health became standard. He got up 12 hours later and made a speech, and everybody said, oh, he's okay now. And but he wasn't. We'll be back with Craig Eaton and more on the left versus the right after we pause to hear from our sponsors. We're back, and we hope you're back. We just took a minute off. We have to let our sponsors identify themselves. Thank you all for coming back and joining us on the left versus the right. Our guest this week, my co-host this week, is Craig Eaton. He's been vice chair of every political organization he's ever been in. He's kind of a vice chair. And what if he became like vice president one day? I can always say I had him on my show. So, Craig, one issue that's just won't go away, no matter what you think about it, is what is our national policy vis-a-vis migrants, and how well is that policy being carried out?
Well, before we get to that, Governor, I just want to do a public service announcement to Vice President Vance. I would be available to be vice president if you ascend to the presidency. So just give us a call at WABC.
This is very good. And we hope it would be by an election. We hope it would be from an election.
Well, I would like him to just put me on his ticket.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's what I'm asking for at this point.
There we go.
But the migrant situation, that was a travesty. We had migrants coming in from all these different countries in airplanes under the cover of night to airports in the remote part of Westchester, Long Island, New York City, and other states around this great country. And the reason they did it under the cover of night is they didn't want everyone to know what was happening.
And just the dishonesty of that, the lying to people. Some of the people saw the flights landing and thought they were UFOs.
Yeah.
It would be like War of the Worlds. People started killing themselves, and it turned out that it wasn't real. There is, I think, this hesitancy to try to cover up everything you're doing. Everything's a big secret. It was one of the things that I didn't like about, being in public office. Like, if you get up and said how you actually felt, don't say that. You're going to offend, somebody. Sometimes you have to offend somebody. Sometimes you have to use your position as an elected leader or even an appointed one to make a point about a situation that's very serious. And, if they wanted to do that, why didn't they just say, something? We like the migrants. We're going to bring some more of them in. And it might not have been good politically, but at least it would have erased the specter of dishonesty.
Yeah, but bringing them in under the cover of night, I guess they figured no one would find out. And then we'd have all these migrants here that no one would be aware of. But, when you look at what happened to this great city here, we had 3,200 migrants housed here in 48 different shelters that were arrested for tens of thousands of crimes. And it was the same groups of migrants committing crimes. And I'm not talking about, petty larceny. I'm talking about violent crimes. You got rape, murder, assault. And, this city got crazy. We've lost a lot of police officers over the last 5 years. So you take away the amount of police officers we had, so we're under what we really need. And now you have all these criminals and crimes being committed by migrants. The city is not a great place right now, and we need to change it. We need to get back to some normalcy and some common sense.
And the interesting thing is that Joe Biden was president at the time. We don't know to what extent he knew or didn't know about the flights into different states. Certainly, people in Westchester are convinced that there were migrants there. And yet, the reaction to it was, oh, no, there's nothing going on. We're not doing anything. And I'm now thinking, I don't know if that was President Biden or somebody else who decided to send those migrants into the metropolitan area and not tell anyone.
Well, I think when the migrant situation started to really accelerate, I think that was past the time where Biden was in control. I mean, look what came out recently, that there were executive orders that were purportedly signed by the president, but it was an electronic signature. We're not even sure if the president was aware of a lot of these executive orders that he was signing.
That's what I'm saying.
So I think that, and that's the sad part. The sad part is, look at President Trump, for example. He works 24 hours a day. He's working 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. You're seeing, texts and emails and everything from him. Biden worked till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then had to take a nap. I mean, the difference between the two presidents is so overwhelming. And that's why our country has some, I'm optimistic that our country is going to recover. Because I think 4 more years under the Biden regime with Kamala Harris, I think we might have hit a point where it would be a point of no return for our country.
It certainly seemed that even the transition of Harris from vice president to candidate for president was uncomfortable. Certainly the president, who was Biden at the time, something was bothering him. I guess he felt he'd been pushed out. But if anybody that watched his conduct during that particular time would have thought that he had to be replaced as a candidate. And, I know President Obama kind of weighed in and Nancy Pelosi weighed in. In those situations, I didn't think they had a choice, because actually if they didn't and he just continued to flounder, then after he lost, everyone would say, well, why didn't you all pull him out? I thought the only chance they had was to pull him out. They just didn't have a candidate that could embrace the embrace the fight and be a presidential candidate.
Well, I mean, I think the National Democratic Party really erred in putting Kamala Harris in as their candidate. I mean, I think there were other candidates out there. I mean, I was almost betting people that Michelle Obama was going to be our candidate for president, and that she was going to somehow step in for Biden. But that didn't happen. Maybe she didn't want it, or for whatever reason. But
Michelle Obama is a very interesting figure in American history, because she has all the ability that Barack Obama has.
100%.
She has it. But she didn't seem to want to either rain on his parade or something like that. But that would have been an interesting candidacy. And boy, that would have turned the race into a real exciting experience with Michelle Obama versus Trump. That would really have been something.
I think it would have been a tougher race.
Who else did you think might have been a candidate?
Well, you know what? John and I talked with Judge Weinberg and everyone in the studio a lot about a rematch between Hillary Clinton and President Trump.
That would have been interesting.
That would have been entertaining. But I don't think she had any interest in it either. But I just think that there was an opportunity there for the Democrats to find a candidate that would have been a much more competitive candidate than Kamala Harris, because clearly I don't think Kamala Harris had the ability to win. And that was shown by the election.
There's some people, they're very intelligent. They understand government, but sometimes it's literally how you perform in front of other people, how you seize the moment. she got a couple in on President Trump in the first debate.
Yes.
And because he said something and she said something like, you see, this is the problem. And then she kind of defined what he was doing. That was pretty good. But that was it.
Yeah.
And I don't think her future endeavors will be any better than they were in the past. You just are what you are.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to seize the moment. If you don't seize the moment, that moment may not ever come back again.
But I do agree with you. In that one debate, I mean, she came out, and it was a very impressive debate.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't like her, you had to say that she held her own in that debate.
Absolutely.
And she was well-spoken, and I was concerned after that debate, to be quite honest with you. But
but that was that was
the one and only.
right.
That's it.
What do they call it? A one-trick pony. So what are your thoughts now for just the economy? The president's trying to figure out whether he wants to cut taxes as he said he would, or raise taxes. How do you see all that going in the next, month or so?
You know what? I am very optimistic. I wouldn't call myself a MAGA guy, but I am a very big supporter of President Trump. You remember years ago, he was looking to run for governor of New York State. And he came to the Republican Party. At that point, I was the vice chair of the state party. And I would meet with him like once a month with different leaders in the Republican Party around the state. And he was actually going to run for governor. But he said, I'm not going to run in a primary. And at that point, Rob Astorino was already a committed candidate, announced candidate. So President Trump said, I'm not going to run in a primary against Rob Astorino. So if you can get Rob Astorino out of the race, I'll run. And that didn't happen. So thankfully, he didn't run for governor.
Best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah, that's the best thing that ever happened to our country, too, in my opinion. But I got to meet him personally many, many times during that period of time. And I just find him to be such an amazing man. I mean, he's comedic, he's intelligent, he's great to be one-on-one in with a room. And I think that he has the best interest of our country at heart. And I think that all the decisions he's made now are all being made for the right reason. So, for example, the tariffs. Am I happy with what the tariffs have done to my pension plan, meaning that I now have to work a little longer? No. But we have to bring industry back to America. A lot of our American companies have gotten lazy and cheap and have China, the people in China and India or elsewhere, build all of our, items. We need to bring that industry back here. We need to be self-sufficient. Think about it. If we have another COVID, we can't be relying on China to get our Purell and our masks anymore.
Right.
We need to be independent. And I think that
self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient. That's a better word. And I think he's trying to make us self-sufficient. Was it too much at the same time? Potentially. Could he have rolled it out a little bit on a little longer period of time? Yes. But I think it'll all work out at the end of the day, because I think we will get trade agreements with a lot of these countries. But I think the reason he's doing this, I agree with 100%.
Well, he certainly got that done with Great Britain.
Yes.
And he won down in about 34 countries to go, and he'll have those deals. I always like when somebody tries something that is unique and independent, and even if it doesn't work out, at least there's leadership.
Yeah.
There are too many people I saw in elective office. I don't know why they even ran.
Yeah.
But they were afraid to do anything. They were afraid of their own shadows in a lot of respects. And that's where the president has defined his own territory.
Yes.
Since that race. I remember that Ed Cox told me that he said to him at that time when Astorino wanted to run and Trump didn't, that what you should really think about is running for president. that he actually said that to
So
him.
we have to thank Chairman Cox for this then.
Yes.
All right.
He's the reason.
You've heard it here. This is here. This is breaking news, Governor.
But absolutely.
But Chairman Cox is such a great leader. I mean, he was the chairman when I was the chairman for those 11 years and the vice chair. He was what a great chairman he was, and he came back to be chairman again.
Yes.
When we needed him, and he never says no, and he works hard, and he puts a lot of his own financial resources into this state, and he works every day and night, and he's doing a great job. I mean, think about what he's done in Congress for us with all the members of Congress he got elected over the last 2 cycles.
And he does it in such a austere way, and just a gentleman.
And humble.
And humble.
Yep.
And doesn't allow himself to get into these,
That's true.
spats as so many of our other colleagues do. And it's certainly been great. I sit next to him on Thursdays and Fridays,
Yes.
right at that same table at 5 o'clock, and he's terrific. I'm sorry.
Sometimes I have him on a Tuesday with me too. And the last month or so, we've had Governor Pataki, my other favorite governor. You're my favorite Democratic governor. George Pataki is my favorite Republican governor. But he's been in studio with me on a Tuesday night, a couple of times over the last month or so, and it's great to have him with us.
Well, he's quite an honorable person,
That's
and
great.
he was very ill at the point that Spitzer resigned and I became
Yes.
governor. He dragged himself up to the inauguration, and they had to stop the car and let him get out and stretch his legs
Wow.
3 or 4 times on the way up and the way back. He never said anything about it, but the state police told me, you need to call him because he did that for you.
Wow.
And you really need to know that. And so he, I called him, and of course he played it. Oh, Governor was not a big deal. I just wanted to see you get sworn in, and that kind of thing.
He is so gracious, Governor. I mean, when I was the chairman, anytime I would ask him to meet with a candidate, he would meet with them and he would talk to them, and then he would follow up with them. And then if he believed in them and believed that they could do the job, he would endorse them.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the same with Mayor Giuliani. He would do the same thing for me. And, the great leaders that we've had, including you in New York City and New York State over the years, we need to get back to that. We need to get back to mayors and governors that look for the betterment of the city of New York and not their own personal achievements.
Well, certainly, Craig Eaton, in your time, you have made the city better. You have made your party better. You have really had an influence on almost everyone that you run into. The people who you didn't have an influence on suffered from a mental disability. They didn't get it. But and having you here on the left versus the right was a real privilege for me. Promise me you'll come back sometime.
I will definitely come back. I just want to say that I brought the mitt with me today, the boxing glove, because I remember watching this with Curtis and Anthony Weiner, and it was a fight, but I brought this. I'm glad I didn't need to use this today, Governor.
I'm glad,
it was
too.
my honor and a privilege always to be in your company.
Well, thank you all out there in Radio Land for listening to this program. Vinny Verdunio will be coming on at 5 o'clock, so you can hear some music now and not 2 old political hacks talking. And at 6 o'clock, Cousin Brucey will be on. Actually, I'm wrong. John Sterling is coming on next at 4 o'clock. My watch is running. I didn't make the change at the right time. Thank you all for joining us.